What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So, the second game of the Autumn Nations Cup has been cancelled. We're going to do what we did for the France-Fiji game. We're going to check on the game of rugby still in the background. I'm going to play as Italy because they're actually rated lower than Fiji in this game for some reason. And we'll get into the game and we'll talk about what this means for the Cup and what's going on. Let's kick this game off. Alrighty, guys. Tommaso Alan's going to kick us off here against Fiji. So, it just got announced that Fiji versus Italy has been called off, and I could not be more sad. It was the game that I was really looking forward to this Autumn Nations Cup. Italy have had a very poor Six Nations. They actually played very well against Scotland. We'll get into that a bit later. I was very, very impressed. Fiji, of course, coming back into this after quite a poor World Cup. They're going to want to improve. I don't think they would have won that game against France, but it would have been nice for them to have had some game time. And the Italy-Fiji game for me was going to be a big, big clash of two teams at very similar quality levels, I would say. Italy being slightly better, but a great opportunity for Fiji to be able to steal a win from a first-tier team. And unfortunately, it's not going to happen. This is coming just under a week after their first game was cancelled. Fiji versus France got cancelled after Semir Andrada and one of the centres got diagnosed with coronavirus, and they had to try and isolate, and they didn't know how much it was going to affect the whole team. The outcome of that was that France actually got given the win. I've literally just put a video out about that today. I didn't think I'd be making this video as soon as I am doing. So if you want to go check out that video, feel free to after this one. So unfortunately for Fiji, they lost that first game 28-0 by default. So they were given 2-week quarantine. They were going to see how they were going to work out. It was likely this game was going to get cancelled anyway, but it could have been that they could have just kept those two people quarantined. They could have brought in a second team of 23 flown out of Fiji to try and play as a bit of a B team for Fiji. We didn't know what was going to happen with it, and it's just been announced today that 29 of the players that came from Fiji have now been positively diagnosed with coronavirus. So, looks like that game's definitely not happening. And to be honest, I think that could be Fiji out of this tournament. I don't really know how they're going to plan to try and get back in time for the Scotland game. At this point, I think it's going to be pretty much they might as well just drop out, and all of the remaining three teams in that Conference B will just have to get 5 points to make it equal across the board. It's not going to be fair to give France 5 points and Italy 5 points and just say Scotland aren't going to play them and they don't get any points. They're going to have to receive 5 points, the same as France have done. It's very, very sad for Fiji. I don't know how all this has come about. The news literally just broke, so by the time you guys are probably seeing this video, there's probably going to be far more information than I have right now. All I know is that 29 players have been diagnosed. So Fiji are pretty much out of this, and probably the most exciting game that I was looking forward to in this whole tournament was going to be this Italy-Fiji team. Italy did very, very well in their game against Scotland. I was thoroughly, thoroughly impressed. They were actually leading for 67 minutes of that game, which is just unheard of for Italy, especially in the last few years. A bit of a newer team doing very, very well. Scotland, of course, had a few players missing, a few key players, really, in the likes of Adam Hastings and Finn Russell. But Duncan Weir had a very, very good game, and that mop top on top of him was helping him all the way. Duan van der Merwe had a really, really good game, was very, very impressed by him. Had a superb game, getting himself right in amongst it, no messing about. But Italy played very, very well. They really brought a lot of passion. You could see it in some of the turnovers they were winning and some of the scrums. Just the exuberance they were showing as soon as they managed to actually win that turnover or win that scrum. Just getting in Scotland's faces, winding them up a bit, knew they were on the front foot, and to be honest, I actually think they deserved to win that game. They just couldn't hold out, as Italy tend to do. That 60-70 minute marker just seems to be the killer for them, and it's just a bit of a shame they couldn't do that. But it means that Italy will now get a week off because they now won't be playing this Fiji team, which is a terrible, terrible shame for them. I really think they're on the up and up, and they just need a bit more game time, a bit more prep. And I think they could get on to playing some of these bigger teams and being able to give them a good game. Scotland, I don't know about that game, may have just performed poorly. I wasn't particularly impressed by all of Scotland. Obviously, they were missing a few key players. Plus, Jamie Ritchie got injured very early on, as well as McAnally, I think it was, also went off. but they should have really held out a little bit better. Duhan van der Merwe making very, very good strides into the world of international rugby. Hamish Watson, of course, just being a big ball carrier that he is. Ali Price played well. But to be honest, across the whole team, for that first half, they seemed really out of their depth. I think they went into the game thinking they were going to run Italy over. And they played a super aggressive front-line defence. They were doing blitz defence. They were just going for full-on attack scale. And Italy were playing very, very well. Little kicks over the top, finding grass. So there's obviously a lot more method now in this Italy team. And I was really looking forward to seeing a bit more of a composed, methodical Italy team versus a bit of a raw, mental team like Fiji, who just go for wild offloads and passes out the back and between their legs and headbutting the ball forwards, whatever else you can think of to do with a rugby ball. But unfortunately, we won't get to see this game. So what does this mean in terms of the tournament as a whole? So in the last video that I did literally today, it's ridiculous how quickly this has turned around. France have been given a 28-0 victory over Fiji, which gives them basically a win plus the 4 tries. They come away with 5 points in that game, which means Italy are just going to have the exact same ruling. I don't think it's going to be fair at all to give that to France and not give that to Italy. So I think they're going to have to get 5 points towards Italy, which would be nice for them. It's just a shame that Fiji don't actually get to play them. And then the follow-up question to this is going to be, what does this mean for Scotland versus Fiji? That was another game I was looking forward to. Although I do believe Scotland would win that and would probably comfortably win that. Maybe not as comfortably as they beat Georgia in their warm-up to the Six Nations, but they certainly would be looking for a win against Fiji. But I think that could be one of the games where you could have seen a bit of a shock game. If Scotland lose to France, they may have wanted to put a bit of a B team on versus Fiji, but if they lose to France, they would definitely need to put a full-side Scotland on. I would love to see a full-side Scotland play, a full-side Fiji, but at the minute I'm going to guess that's not going to be happening. If they've got 29 players down in positive things, they're going to need to have 2 weeks worth at least in order to get out. That's going to make them miss the game no matter what. So the question is then, do Fiji have the depth in the world of rugby to create a second 31-man squad? Could they fly out another team? Could just be a bunch of basically under-18s coming in. I don't really know how they'd work it. There must be a couple of youngster players working in Fiji at the minute that could maybe step up to the mark. It might give them some real good time in an international environment. They'd probably get beaten quite heavily. But just to experience what it's like, I don't know an awful lot about Fijian club rugby or how many players in the Fiji team actually play abroad in maybe France or in the English Premiership. But from what I saw at the World Cup, I probably wouldn't say Fiji have the depth of a lot of the other teams. You know, as you get towards that sort of middle marker, teams like Italy, who, although have currently actually got quite a good starting 50, and I wouldn't even believe Italy could say they have a very strong, 35, 40-man Italian team. That 31-man team they bring in even includes some sort of debutants. I don't think they'd be able to have the super depth. And I don't think the financial amount is quite there in Fiji to have their game up to that amount. But I think it would be fun maybe to look at an under-21s team or an under-18s team, maybe looking to fly them out. But then the question comes in, would it be fair for Scotland to have to play a game that both Italy and France have got to miss, effectively? Both of those teams will have slightly less tired players. Obviously, you're missing a full game of rugby. You've got the lack of chance of being able to gain an injury. I don't know how that would actually affect the tournament. I feel like at this point they're probably just going to have to pull Fiji from the tournament and either take away the 5 points from France that they have at the moment, or they'd have to just give the bonus 5 points to both Scotland and Italy to make it fair, making Conference B that run of 3 teams, which I think it's going to be a little bit tight. It's going to be a bit harsh on Italy because they've already lost to Scotland, and I don't really see Italy being able to take on France. It's very likely that the France team that will play Italy will be a B team, so there is every chance that they could turn up for that one, and that would now be their striking game. It's going to be interesting to see that game actually in terms of now that these Italian players get another week's rest, another week's training, they already get to look forward. This announcement's come very early. It's Tuesday right now when I'm filming this. So they've got now a week and a half to prep for playing that game against France. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult because they won't know quite the game plan that France team might have, because if they're bringing in B team players, they can't just watch the game of France versus Scotland to see how France are going to perform. They'll probably have a totally different sort of attack plan for France-Italy, but they do get an extra week time off. Maybe Italy could turn up for that game and maybe have a bit of a shock where they're able to beat France. I would really look forward to seeing that game. But as a tournament as a whole, it's a bit of a shame that Fiji are going to miss out on this one. Fiji is one of the teams I think a lot of people were looking forward to see. Fiji and Georgia. There's been a lot of talk about the Six Nations and whether Italy belong in the Six Nations just because of how often they do lose matches. Although, as a Wales supporter, I'm beginning to feel like we need Italy there to try and bolster some ranks. But there's talks about the teams that could come in to replace Italy if Italy were to leave the Six Nations, some of which have been Japan. Georgia has been thrown in there as a bit of a mention, and Fiji are another team. These sort of tier 2 nations that are borderline tier 1, but they just can't seem to get the wins against tier 1 nations. And tournaments like this really help them boost their confidence in being able to play tier 1 nations. And it's a shame that Fiji don't get to have that experience on the international scenery. Now, as Georgia are doing, Georgia actually didn't have as bad of a game against England as I thought they were going to. Obviously, they lost heavily, and we all sort of thought they were going to lose heavily. But the first half hour of that England-Georgia game, I was very impressed, actually. Just the defensive capabilities that Georgia was showing in that game. And it shows that they do have discipline, they are willing to work hard, they do have a bit of a game plan set up, and they can take on these international teams of a higher quality, but it just goes down to fitness levels. You know, I don't know how much finance is involved with the international team for Georgian or Fijian international rugby, and it's definitely nowhere as near as much as, say, England would have for their international team. How much of the coaching staff, what are their facilities like? They don't really have the ability to go in financially at preparing for these games, so it then comes down to just sheer willingness and drive of the players. So they need experience on the pitch in order to be able to play tier 1 nations, and I just don't think things like this is going to help them out at all. So I really do think it would be a big help to them to be able to get maybe their under 21 side, or maybe some 18, 19, 20-year-olds on the play, get them over there, get them over here, get them in a game. They're going to lose heavily, well, that's going to happen, but at least it gives them a bit of experience. You look down the line 2-3 years time, maybe coming up to that next World Cup, having a couple of 18-year-olds. We see them now, and we've had them before, people like George North. But let me know what you think, guys. Is it worth Fiji flying out some of the younger players in order to get some international time on the go? Do Fiji just drop out of the cup? Do they just give the points now to the rest of them? Do they try and push for Scotland to play Fiji in that final game of Conference B? Let me know what you guys think. I'm really, really interested. And of course, I'm going to be following all the rest of the international games coming up. I'll be doing more prediction videos later in the week as the teams get announced. So if you enjoy this style of commentary where I just chat for a bit over a game of rugby, make sure you subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all those videos as they get released. And make sure if you enjoy this video that you drop it a like. It is muchly appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed this video today, guys. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.